All right, for our lesson today is lesson number 2, and the title of it is The Birth of Moses. And, a lot of times we think of Moses, and the first thing that kind of comes to my mind is the meekness that Moses had. And I think it's recorded in the Bible somewhere that somebody gave Moses the label of being the most meek man there ever was, and kind of like Solomon being the wisest man as there ever was. But either way, what God gives us and what we use for what God gives us, that's what's most important. When God gives us something to use, to do, we need to use and do the things that He has for us to do there. Our memory verse is Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. I'm going to, after we get through reading our lesson, I'm going to come back and kind of look at that verse there. It's a verse that a lot of people quote. A lot of Christians will quote that verse. So we'll look at that as we finish up our lesson today, if we got time there. The emphasis there. I'm going to read the adult emphasis and then some of the junior emphasis there. To limit population among the Israelites, Pharaoh had ordered that all their boy babies be cast into the river. First he put restrictions on them by making them work hard and long and all, and thought that was going to solve the problem of population. And that didn't work, and so he decided to tell the midwives to kill all the boy babies, and that didn't work. And so now he's saying that all boy babies need to be thrown into the river. Pharaoh had ordered that all their boy babies be cast into the river. And so that's what's in progress right now. Could God protect them against so cruel a ruler and so drastic an order? Could God protect them from that? Well, let's just see what happens here. Also, the junior emphasis is God has a plan to save Moses from being drowned in the river. And each person that is born has a purpose. And I think we'll run into that later in our life. But God had a special purpose for Moses. Aaron was born before all this took place. Miriam was born before all this took place. And, Miriam had her position in what was going on. Aaron had his position. And then Moses comes along, and I think he was the baby of the family. And Moses comes along, and then there's this terrible outbreak or terrible thing of getting rid of the population at his time. But God knew that He had a special plan for Moses. Not that He didn't have a special plan for Aaron, because if we will remember, that's where the priesthood come from Aaron. And then also Moses couldn't talk very well. If we will think about the kind of get ahead of ourselves here, Moses couldn't talk very well. He's kind of like me. I can't talk very well. But and he brought that before God. He said, well, I just can't talk very well. Well, you got a brother, and he's good at talking. And, so you relay what needs to be said to him, and he can relay it to the people. God always has an answer for us. We might come up with an excuse. Well, Lord, I can't do this. Lord, I can't do that. And a lot of times, and maybe sometimes, maybe not a lot of times, but maybe sometimes it's we don't want to do it, And that's when we get in trouble. So we have to really, really watch. When God calls us, be willing. Like myself, I can't talk all that well. I don't use the right grammar all the time. But if God wants me up here teaching, then that's where I need to be. And so, what I can't express in a way that I feel like is right, the Holy Spirit can lead in that respect. And the only thing I got to do is follow God, follow the Holy Spirit, and things will fall in place. And so that's kind of what Moses did here. But I'm way ahead, so let's go back and get started here. Exodus 2, 1 and 2, and it says, "And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took a wife, a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months." Where did she hide him? Probably in the home. That's probably where she hid him, for 3 months there. And but babies grow up, and so that's kind of a temporary solution there. Hiding the baby. Last week we read how Pharaoh ordered that the Israelites kill all their boy babies. Of course, they did not want to do that. One family had a baby boy. The father's name was Amram. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And the mother, Jochebed. They loved their baby, a goodly child. However, what mother does not see her child as goodly? I like that, the way they said that. Every parent that has a newborn baby, oh, that's the cutest baby I ever saw. Somebody else sees them and, well, he ain't near as cute as our children, when they were born. Have you ever noticed that? That's maybe being a little bit vain, and all, but a newborn baby, that's ours. We made this little thing. God gave us this little bundle of joy. God gave that to us, And then the next thing that hits your mind, oh my, there's responsibility that goes with this. There's responsibility. Did I really realize this when I got married, that there's responsibility, I'm not used to raising children, This is my first time. It all hits you at one time. I've had...
Poor Lance.
What's that?
The poor Lance.
Poor Lance. The first one, it kind of hits you as that, And the second one, you think, oh, now I got double responsibility, and 3, oh, I got triple responsibility, and so, well, that's as far as it went with us. But you take people that has 8, 9, 10, why, look, my. But, they had a responsibility here. This was not their first one either. They had Aaron and Miriam before that, but they were in a crisis here because of what the decree was, the decree that Pharaoh had put out. But, that mother, and I'm sure that father, However, what mother or what father does not see their child as goodly? And that's what it all boils down to. He was a nice baby, and of course they loved him. They wanted to keep him. Even though the decree was out, they wanted to keep him. Well, you got 2 older ones, you can get rid of this one. No, it didn't matter whether this was the 3rd one or the 15th one. They were still wanting to keep it there. Not daring to cast him away, instead they dared to defy the king's wicked order. His mother hid him 3 months. This at best could be but a temporary solution. Where did they hide him? They probably hid him in the house there somewhere. And, done the best she could. They hid him. God, too, wanted that baby to live, though. How many mothers tried to pull the same thing and were caught with the baby, and they had to get rid of it, Probably a bunch of them. Can't you just hear of a night a mother lost her baby during the day, and the wailing and the crying and the disappointments, and what a mess that was. But here she was trying her best to keep that baby. He had a great work. God said that he had a great work for him to do, for Moses to do. God has a work for every baby. Every baby that's born, God has a work for. With America and the birth control, Planned Parenting, and all that, we don't know really what the repercussions is on this at all. We could go back in time and think, what if Washington would have been aborted? Where would this country be? Lincoln, Thomas Edison. How many Thomas Edisons has been aborted? Alexander Graham Bell could have been aborted. Henry Ford, D.S. Warner, Charles Naylor, B.E. Byron, or Warren, B.E. Warren. Just think, Byron's one of them too. Just think, we don't know what the repercussions are from what has taken place in America. Every baby born has a purpose in God's mind. God has a purpose for every baby. Now, when that baby grows up and God calls it, whatever, and then it's up to that person to do what God says, And so, it's very important how important God's plan is. It's very important for us to know how important God's plan is. Let me put it that way. We don't always know how important it is, and a lot of times things has to happen, and we see it then in later life. But at the time, Christians knows that God's plan is important, and we have to live according to that each and every day. Sometimes maybe we're called on to do something that's just kind of a small thing. That's not going to make a whole lot of difference, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. And then it turns into a big thing, Wow, I'm glad I followed the leading of God. Or sometimes it might be a big thing and we don't want to do it, But you know, we need to do it no matter what it is. And these parents were faithful to hide Moses. And you know, we can skip ahead because we already know the whole story, but we can skip ahead and think, what if Moses would have been aborted or done away with? Where would the children of Israel, where would it have wound up at, you know? But no, it's because Amram and Jochebed did what God wanted them to do. And that's follow God's leadings there. And what tribe was they from? They was from Levi tribe, wasn't they? All right, verse 3. And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and dabbed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. Putting the baby in the river. Well, that's what the command was to put him in the river. Well, throw him in the river. Only she didn't throw him in the river. She laid him gently in the river. Used the very thing that Pharaoh wanted to kill him. Used that very thing and made a little ark for him there. Babies grow up. They could not keep him hid any forever. What should they do? Surely Jochebed must have asked God. You know, she had to be a godly person, because here you know, any mother would want to save their child. You know, that doesn't really prove that she was a godly woman. But think about how she raised Moses, and Moses stayed true to the things of God there. But you know, she feared God, and that she put God first and said, well, here it is, Lord. What do I do? What do I do? Well, I don't think she dreamed this ark up on her own, but God probably told her, said, just make a little ark for him there. And so that's what she did. She took an ark or a closed basket woven of bulrushes. She put pitch over it to keep the water out. Into it she put the baby and closed it over him. She took her daughter Miriam, the baby's sister. They went to the river. Had not Pharaoh ordered them to put the babies into the river? That was what the command was. Only she did not cast him to be drowned, and she laid him in, protected by the ark like a little boat. Then leaving Miriam afar off to watch, Jochebed went home. Was she praying and trusting God for the baby? I'm sure that's probably what she was doing. I'm sure that's what she was doing. We think she must have been doing that. She put the matter out of her hands and altogether into the hands of God. You know, that's when crisis comes up, if we will do that, we say, Lord, take this crisis and do with it whatever you want to. But don't take it out of his hands and take it back on you. Leave it there. That's what's most important, is to leave it there. Because God's big enough to take care of the situation. Way bigger than we are. Because 10 times out of 10, we're going to make a mess out of it if we do that. I'll guarantee you that. And I think that figures up to about 100%. All, I think, like Brother Bayless likes to mention. We may not understand what the people do and why they do it sometimes. You know, we might see a saint doing something and we don't understand what's going on. But you know, if they're following God's will, it's not for us to worry about. You know, It's between them and God, you know. And, you know, we don't want to interfere with it because we don't want to be a stumbling block or a hindrance or anything to our fellow Christians, our brothers and sisters. Because if we are, you know, that just makes a big mess out of our life, out of their life, and whoever they are associated with, plus whoever we're associated with. So say it's bigger than just me and whoever I have a fault with, you know. So that's very, very important. And you know, other mothers might have thought, well, what are you doing that for? You're just right there, you know, right there. We're right practically under the king's nose, or as we'll find out, the king's daughter's nose. But you know, that's what God told her to do. That's what God told her to do. And you know, when God tells you to do, when God told Jochebed to do that, she probably thought, maybe way down here would have been better. Not right up here close to the palace, you know, maybe down here. No, God says right there. And, you know, I mean, that's my speculation, that it's not recorded in the Bible that way, but I'm kind of thinking that, you know, whatever God tells us to do, that's what we need to do. And that's what's most important there. Verse 5, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. And her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister, which is Miriam, to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? Pharaoh's daughter says, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. In verse 8 it says, Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. So in other words, Pharaoh's daughter, oh yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. So that's what happened. Soon Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe herself in the river. Her maiden servants were with her. She saw the ark. She had her servant bring the ark to her. She looked in, and the baby cried. It touched her heart. It touched her heart. Natural pity by God stirred in the heart of the princess. Would she follow her heart or her father's policy? That's a question. For surety, she realized the babe as one of the Hebrews' children. Okay, my father said that all the Hebrew boys need to be thrown in the river. This is a Hebrew boy here. It's not an Egyptian boy. It's not a Hebrew girl. Either one of them would have been saved. But it's a Hebrew boy. But God worked on her heart. The sisters offered to call a Hebrew nurse for the child, brought a command to go. Go and get it. Gladly Miriam called her mother, the one person who most deserved to nurse that child, her own son. Miriam. You know, Moses was a little feller there, and you know, he's like any other baby. You know, his mother probably told him to be quiet. You know, well, you know, more you say be quiet to a child, to a baby, it seems like the more they holler, you know. And you know, okay, Moses did what was natural. You know, Miriam had a little job to do. And Miriam was faithful in what she did. You know, Jochebed, let me back up. Jochebed had orders from God to give Miriam a job to do. And it was up to Miriam to be able to to do that job. It's rather nice when children are compliant and obedient to their parents. And how many Miriams are there out there in the world? You know, it seems like more and more they're fewer and fewer because they don't respect their parents. They don't they don't do what they're supposed to do. Well, a lot of it goes back, how's the parents teaching them? You know? And you can see, the way they're teaching, I can understand why the child is the way it is. So, you know, there's a lot of responsibility. Just like when we have that first child, there's a lot of responsibility. And that's the responsibility, one of the responsibilities that I was thinking about when I mentioned that at the very first. Because that is, God allows us to have children, gave us them children to raise the way God wants them to be raised. And it looks like Jochebed done a real good job at raising Miriam there, because she did what was supposed to be done there. Let's go to verse 9, and it says, "And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away," talking to Jochebed, "and nurse it for me, and I will give thee wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. Don't you know she was a happy woman after that night? "And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, Because I drawed him out of the water." Jochebed had given Miriam a task. Did she do it well? Yes, that's what's written here. She was an obedient child. She was faithful. What if she had not been? She saw that Pharaoh's daughter liked the baby. She went up close. "Shall I go and call for the nurse?" That's what she said in the previous readings there. When Pharaoh's daughter said go, what did Miriam do? Miriam ran gladly and quickly. And who'd she run to? She called her mother, also the mother of Moses, the baby's mother. The princess handed the baby to Jochebed and said she would pay her to care for him. The question is, was Jochebed happy? I'm sure she was. I'm sure she was. The baby grows older. The child grew. When he was old enough to leave his mother, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him. She made him as her own son. She named him Moses. She gave him the best education possible. In Acts 7:22, it's not in your lesson there, but I'm going to read it. And it says, "And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds." Now that's what Acts, the writer of Acts, says there. And so, you know, it all comes down getting prepared for something to happen a little later on. However, his own mother taught him to love his people and to love and obey God. If that's not so, where did Moses get his godly advice from? I'm for certain that he didn't get it from Pharaoh's daughter. They served a complete different God. Even though they were friendly, even though the Pharaohs was friendly when Joseph came down, they still served a different God. They liked Joseph, even though they served different gods. But now, them was all dead. Them Pharaohs was all dead. And they didn't like the Hebrew people now. And yet, the Hebrew people still remembered, some of them did anyway, still remember who God was. They still remember the covenant that God made with their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Some of them still remembered that. And thank God, Jochebed and her husband remembered that also. And so it was very important that this was instilled in Moses' mind too. Not only the learning and the teachings and the education that he had, and I'm not saying education's not good, education's good. It's very good. But let's make sure that we don't get so in touch with education we leave God out. Because education and God works together. Believe it or not, education and God works together there. His later history, talking about Moses, would make it appear that as Jochebed cared for him, she was teaching him the story of their people and of God, who had called and led them. So we see how if we trust God, He will never let us down. And that sentence that I just said, the main word in that sentence is trust. Trust in God. You know, I think we have a song in our songbook, trust and obey. And that is very, very important. I remember the first time I heard that song sang. I can remember it, and I thought, and I had never heard that song sang before. Trust and obey. And you know, it's the only way, or something like that in there, you know. It's God's way, and you know, and that's what we need to do. We need to trust God and obey God, because if we don't obey God, then the trust is going to leak out, and we won't have trust then. But you know, that's what we need to do. Fight hard to keep the trust, and by doing the obeying also. And have, what's most important is to have a relationship with God. And when we do that, we can be able to put our trust. Did you have your trust in your mother and your father when you were growing up? Most of us did. You know, if we grew up in a good family relationship, yeah, we could trust our mother, we could trust our father. And, you know, what did we do then? We wanted to obey them. And so, you know, it's the same way with God. Trust and obey. It's the only way that God would really accept us is through that. Let's go to our memory verse then, at the front of the book there, front of the lesson. Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. Did Amram and Jochebed, did they love God? My answer to that is, I'm sure they loved God. Did things work out for them? Things worked out a lot better for them than some of the other people. Because, let's go to the rest of that, to them who are called according to His purpose. And you know, God has a calling for each and every one of us. I've already brought that into the lesson. God has a calling for each and every one of us. And you know, if He calls us and we trust and obey Him, then everything's going to work out good. That's what this verse says. How God works. God knows how to make all things work together for good. You know, that's one good thing about God. We can trust Him that everything will work out good. Sometimes we may be in a big old pickle, so to speak. You know, sometimes we might think, wow, I'm in a position, I don't know how I'm going to get out of it. But you know, if we will just trust in God, you know, He weaves around and comes around and gets us through that and sets us free. And, you know, He led us through this. Man, He led us through this mess here. And, you know, just think, we're sitting pretty now and we're going along. Well, just remember, there's probably another test coming. You know, when things are going good, rejoice and be glad. But think about if another test comes. Remember that one we just come through not too long ago? Well, if it's a bigger and badder test, God's going to lead us through. And that's one thing we can count on. But we must keep our eyes on Him. God knows how to do how to make all things work together for good. He used Pharaoh's order. He used Pharaoh's daughter. He used Jochebed. He used Miriam. And He even used the crying baby, didn't He? By them, He saved Moses' life and gave him an education for the work he was to do. He even got an education out of that. How many other of these little Hebrew children running around got an education like Moses got? Not very many of them, was they? But Moses, in fear of being killed, he even got a big education out of it. See how God works? Well, yeah, but He'd never do it for me. Yeah, He would yes, He will. He sure will. If you will trust in Him, He sure can do that. What if the princess had not gone to the river? Or what if Marion had not been obedient? You know? That's the reason why I say that everyone has a job to do. You know, it was, okay, we say it might have been by chance that the Pharaoh daughter came to the river. Okay, maybe we can say that. But it wasn't by chance that Miriam obeyed. She obeyed because she loved God. That's the reason. She might have been pretty young, but you know, she obeyed God. She obeyed God by obeying her parents. And you know, she probably liked that little baby just as well as her mom and daddy did. Well, it'd be a little different love, but you know what I mean. She liked that little baby. But you know, God had that princess to go, not by chance, but to go and find that baby that day, worked on her heart to be compassionate to that baby that day for him to be saved then. And so, you know, in God's time, things come together. We might want it to happen 4 days early, but you know, we might have to endure 4 days or however long, and then in His time is when it works together. The outcome of this event hinged upon the joining of several simple happenings. Had any of them occurred at a different time or place or involved different people, it could not have turned out as it did. Who directed each incident? That's what's most important. Who directed that? God knew the future. God knew exactly. He was working on Miriam. He was working on Jochebed. He was working on the Pharaoh's daughter. See, He's working on all that at the same time. You know, in order, and probably Moses too when he cried. That might have been what melted her heart down when He opened the basket there, and there He cried. Okay, so see, God God knows exactly and works on every end of the spectrum that needs to be worked on. God knew the future. He knew these people. He knew His plan for them. He had the power and wisdom to carry out the plan. God planned for each of these events to coincide perfectly. The people could have frustrated those plans by refusing to follow the impulses God stirs within them, but they did not. Let us not frustrate God by refusing to follow the impulses that God gives on us. You know, that's what I want you to get out of this lesson about more than anything. Let's not frustrate God in His work, because we can become a stepping stone or we can become a stumbling block. You know, that's the two ways that we can go. I don't want to be a stumbling block to nobody. And if I can help somebody, that's what I want to be. I want to be that stepping stone. So that's what's most important there. I'm going to leave it with you. Amen.